Think about your biggest setback, the one that cost the most, the one that sent you back to a place you had fought hard to leave. Now think about who was present just before it happened, not during the crisis, before it. A phone call, a moment where this specific person entered your atmosphere, and then something fell. Now think about the setback before that one. Same person. And the one before that, same person. That is not coincidence repeated 3 times. That is a pattern. And patterns, in the hands of a God who does not waste anything, always mean something. Here is the question nobody is asking about this person. Why does the setback keep arriving through them specifically? This is not about blaming them for what happened. It is about recognizing that their presence and your setbacks have aligned too consistently to keep treating as coincidence. That consistency is worth examining. God never wastes a pattern. He has been waiting for you to finally read this one. 4 revelations about why the same person keeps appearing before your biggest setbacks, and what God has been trying to show you through a pattern you have been living inside without ever fully seeing. Each revelation goes deeper than the one before it, and the 4th one will not name the person. It will name you. Revelation number 1. They are not randomly present. They are the access point. Everything is moving forward. The clarity, the confidence, more real than it has been in months. And then this person enters the picture. Not dramatically, casually. A conversation that seemed ordinary, a presence that felt familiar, a moment that did not announce itself as dangerous. And something in the forward movement stops. A decision gets made from a different place than the one you were standing in before they appeared. A doubt enters that was not present before the conversation. A compromise gets extended that the version of you from 3 days earlier would not have entertained. The setback arrives, and looking back, the thread leads directly to the moment they appeared. In Judges 16, Samson was one of the most formidable people of his generation. Every significant loss of his strength, every moment the assignment became vulnerable, came through the same door. Not warfare on an open battlefield, an intimate relationship. Delilah did not take his strength by force. She simply kept asking, and he kept opening the same door. Each time, Samson explained it away rather than examining the pattern. Here is the observation underneath that story. A setback rarely arrives through a door that was never opened. It tends to arrive through one that has been opened before. The person who keeps appearing before your biggest losses may not be powerful because of who they are. They may be significant because of what opens in you when they appear. A desire for their approval, a fear of their disappointment, a wound that their presence consistently reactivates. That is worth examining as the door. Here's what you should do. Write down the last 2 setbacks where this person appeared. Beside each one, write what changed in you after they entered the picture, not what they did. What changed in you? The pattern lives in that answer. The second revelation goes inside that question and names what has actually been living there. Revelation number 2. Their presence is consistently finding something God has been trying to heal. Is there a version of yourself that only emerges around this person? Not a dramatic transformation. Something subtler. A specific insecurity that is mostly quiet until they appear. A fear that surfaces in their atmosphere that nowhere else produces with the same intensity. A need for their response that shapes decisions you would not make if they were not in the room. That version of you is not the setback. It is the door the setback walks through. The night of Jesus' arrest, Peter sat in a courtyard. Not a battlefield, a courtyard, an ordinary fire. A servant girl looked at him and said, "You were with him too, weren't you?" Not a soldier, a servant girl. And the fear of man, the specific wound in Peter that had been largely quiet through 3 years with Jesus, never fully brought before God, never fully surrendered, activated. He denied knowing the man he had followed for 3 years, 3 times. The trigger was not powerful. The unhealed place it found was. The person who keeps appearing before your setbacks is not destroying you with their strength. They are finding the place that God has been pointing to for longer than you have been willing to look. The fear never fully surrendered. The wound never fully brought before him. The need never fully placed in his hands rather than in this person's responses. That place is what the setback keeps moving through. Within 24 hours, ask God directly, what is the specific thing in me that this person's presence consistently activates? Not what they do, what they find. Because what God shows you in that answer is the place He has been waiting to heal. The third revelation names what you do with it, and it is the hardest thing in this video to receive. Which of the first 2 revelations has landed most personally for you? Keep your number, because the 4th revelation is going to reframe everything the first 3 pointed toward. Revelation number 3. Every time they appear, you make the same agreement. This is the one that names what you have been doing, not what the person is doing to you, what you choose in response to them. Because here is what the first two revelations have been building toward. The setback does not arrive because this person is powerful. It arrives because when they appear, you consistently make an internal agreement that opens the door. An agreement with the fear their presence activates. An agreement with the insecurity their words surface. An agreement with the need their presence triggers that overrides the discernment you normally carry. In Numbers 13, Israel stood at the threshold of the land God had promised them. 12 spies went in to assess. 10 came back and made an agreement. Not with the enemy, with what the enemy made them feel about themselves. We were like grasshoppers in our own eyes. The land did not defeat them. The agreement they made about themselves when they saw the land defeated them. And they lived inside that agreement for 40 years. Not because God removed the promise, because the same agreement kept being made every time the prospect of crossing into it became real. Now think about the person in your life. Every time they appear before a setback, what is the agreement you make? Maybe it is, I need their approval before I move forward. Maybe it is, if they question this, perhaps it is not as real as I believed. Maybe it is, I will hold back the version of me that has been growing because I do not know how they will receive it. That agreement, extended at the threshold of every significant season, is the mechanism the setbacks have been using. Within 24 hours, name the agreement in one sentence. Write it down. The fourth revelation reframes everything you have heard so far. It will not feel like a warning. Revelation 4. The setback was never only about them, and what it exposed may have been exactly what God needed you to see. This is where most people expect the revelation to tell them to remove the person. It does not say that, because removing the person does not close the door. The door is in you. Remove this person without addressing what their presence exposes, and the next person who arrives will find the same door. The same setback will follow wearing a different face. The person changes. The pattern does not. Because the pattern was never primarily about them. It was about the territory in you that their presence kept making visible. Now here is where the perspective shifts. In Genesis 39, Potiphar's wife appeared before one of the most devastating setbacks in Joseph's journey, a false accusation, imprisonment. From the outside, it looked like everything had collapsed. But notice where the setback placed him. The royal prison, where the king's personal servants were held. Among them, the king's cupbearer. The one person whose access to Pharaoh, once activated, opened a door no direct path could have reached. Scripture does not explicitly say God designed Potiphar's wife's actions. What it does show is that God was present and purposeful through what followed them. The setback became the corridor, not because the betrayal was good, but because God is capable of working through what was not good to produce what He promised. That distinction matters, and it is worth holding carefully rather than turning into a formula. What it does invite you to ask is this: is it possible that some of the setbacks connected to this person's appearances were not simply losses, but exposures of territory in you that, left unaddressed, would have cost you more than the setbacks themselves? That is a different question than God planned this. It is the question of whether you are willing to look at what the pattern has been showing you and bring it before God rather than only bringing the person. The setback was never only about them. It was always partly about the version of you that appears when they do. Within 24 hours, bring the territory before God, not the person. The specific internal place their presence has been consistently exposing. Name it honestly. Ask Him what He wants to do with it. Because what the pattern keeps surfacing is worth taking seriously. Not as a verdict on the person, but as an invitation toward your own deeper healing. Before you apply this framework, sit with 3 honest questions. 1. Is the pattern genuine, a repeated, documented connection across multiple setbacks and multiple seasons? Or am I in a painful relationship looking for a spiritual framework to explain what might simply need a direct and honest conversation? 2. Is it possible that what I am identifying as a setback was actually a course correction God was making, and attributing it to this person as a way of externalizing a redirect that would have happened regardless of who was present? 3. Is what I am receiving drawing me toward healing and self-examination, or toward blame, and a way of explaining my setbacks that requires no personal accountability? The purpose of this framework is to surface the territory in you the pattern keeps exposing, not to provide a spiritual rationale for grievance. One thing before any strategy: bring the territory before God, not the relationship, not the history of the setbacks, A specific internal place that this person's presence has been consistently activating. Name it honestly and ask him to do what the pattern has been pointing toward. Because that territory is what every setback has been trying to expose. And when it is finally brought before God, genuinely, specifically, without deflection toward the person, pattern loses the ground it has been standing on. Every sign in this video has a corresponding prayer strategy, a prayer for protecting the deposit window, the space between receiving what God sends and establishing it in your spirit, and a specific declaration for the moment you choose to protect the building without abandoning the love. Free guide in the description. Use it before the next conversation with the person this video just named. What God has begun in you was never meant to be quietly dismantled by someone standing close enough to touch it. Type, "I see the building" in the comments. Find the person beneath you who typed the same thing and leave them one sentence, the kind that reminds someone who just saw clearly that clarity is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the construction God always designed.